My wife's family convinced her I was cheating. I wasn't. She divorced me and took everything. Now they want me back because the real cheater was exposed. Hey, before we move on to the video, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Thanks. This is going to be long, but I need to get this off my chest because my entire world has been turned upside down again, and I honestly don't know what to think anymore. Background: I'm 34M, and this story starts about 8 years ago when I was married to my ex-wife Sarah, 32F. We had what I thought was a solid marriage of 6 years, 2 beautiful kids, Emma, now 12, and Jake, now 10, and I genuinely believed we were happy. Sarah came from a very tight-knit family. Her parents, Linda and Robert, treated me well enough in the beginning, though I always felt like I had to prove myself to them. Her brother Mark, 36M, was the golden child who could do no wrong, married to his high school sweetheart Jessica, with 2 kids of their own. I worked in IT consulting and had built up a decent client base. Sarah was a part-time teacher, and we had a comfortable middle-class life. I traveled sometimes for work, but never for more than a few days, and I always made sure to be present for important family events. The beginning of the end, everything started falling apart in March 2016. I had been working on a big project for a client about 3 hours away, which required me to stay overnight twice a week for about a month. It was good money, and Sarah and I had agreed it would help us save for the down payment on a bigger house. I started noticing Sarah acting strange around this time. She'd be on her phone constantly, but would quickly put it away when I came into the room. She started picking fights over small things that never bothered her before. I'd come home from my overnight trips and she'd be cold and distant. The breaking point came in early May. I came home from a client trip to find Sarah sitting at the kitchen table with her parents and Mark. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and Sarah had clearly been crying. When I asked what was wrong, Robert stood up and told me we needed to talk. They sat me down and told me they knew about my affair. I was completely blindsided. I asked what they were talking about, and Linda pulled out printed screenshots of text messages, hotel receipts, and photos that supposedly proved I was cheating on Sarah with a woman named Monica. I stared at these documents in complete shock. The text messages showed intimate conversations between my phone number and some woman, talking about meeting up, how much they missed each other, planning secret rendezvous. The hotel receipts were from the same city where I'd been working, but for nights when I'd supposedly been staying at the company-arranged hotel. The photos showed a man who looked like me from behind, holding hands with a blonde woman. I told them this was impossible, that I had never cheated on Sarah, that I didn't even know anyone named Monica. I pulled out my phone to show them my actual text messages, but Sarah just cried harder. Mark stood up and got in my face, calling me a lying piece of garbage, asking how I could do this to his sister and the kids. I begged Sarah to believe me, trying to explain that someone had obviously faked this evidence, but she wouldn't even look at me. She said she'd suspected something for weeks, and now she had proof. When I asked her what she meant, she said Mark had been the one to warn her that I was probably cheating because of all my overnight trips. The accusations escalate over the next few weeks. Things got exponentially worse. Sarah moved back in with her parents and took the kids with her. She filed for divorce and got a temporary restraining order against me, claiming I had threatened her when she confronted me about the affair, which absolutely never happened. I was only allowed supervised visitation with my kids. The worst part was how quickly everyone turned against me. Sarah's family had always been well connected in our small town. Within a month, I had lost 3 major clients because word had spread about my affair. My gym membership was revoked. I was asked to step down from coaching Jake's Little League team. People I'd known for years would cross the street to avoid talking to me. But the absolute worst part was what happened with my kids. Emma and Jake had been told that Daddy had hurt Mommy very badly, and that's why they couldn't live with me anymore. They were scared of me during our supervised visits. Emma, who used to run into my arms when I came home from work, would barely look at me. Jake asked me why I made Mommy cry all the time. The divorce proceedings were a nightmare. Sarah's family hired the most expensive lawyer in town, while I was struggling financially after losing clients and had to use a public defender. Every single piece of fake evidence was presented as fact. Sarah got full custody of the kids, with me getting supervised visitation every other weekend. She got the house, both cars, and half of my business assets. I was ordered to pay substantial child support and alimony. I went from being a successful small business owner and family man to living in a studio apartment, working odd IT jobs just to make my court-ordered payments. The absolute lowest point came during the custody hearing. Sarah's entire family testified about what a terrible husband and father I'd been. Mark took the stand and talked about how he'd always suspected I was cheating, how I'd been emotionally abusive to Sarah, and how the children were afraid of me. Linda cried on the witness stand talking about how I destroyed her daughter's life and traumatized her grandchildren. Rock bottom, the 2 years following the divorce were the darkest period of my life. I lost my apartment and had to move in with an old college friend 2 hours away. This meant I could barely afford the gas money to drive back for my supervised visits with the kids, and I had to miss several because of work conflicts. Sarah's lawyer went back to court claiming I was an absent father who was prioritizing work over my children. My visitation was reduced to once a month. Emma and Jake started asking why I never came to see them anymore. I fell into a deep depression. I gained weight, stopped taking care of myself, and honestly considered ending it all more than once. The only thing that kept me going was the hope that someday I'd be able to prove my innocence and have a real relationship with my kids again. The most devastating blow came when Emma's school counselor called me to say that she'd been having behavioral problems and was acting out sexually in ways that were inappropriate for her age. I realized that Sarah's family had been feeding the children lies about me, probably telling them explicit details about my supposed affair to turn them against me. Starting over after about 3 years of this hell, I made the painful decision to move across the country to where my parents lived in Oregon. I couldn't afford to keep fighting a legal battle I was never going to win, and the monthly visits with my kids had become so traumatic for all of us that I wondered if they'd be better off without me. I left behind everything I'd known and started completely over. I moved in with my parents at age 31, got into therapy, and slowly began rebuilding my life. I started freelancing again, doing remote IT work, and eventually built up enough clients to rent my own place. The hardest part was accepting that my children believed I was a terrible person. I sent birthday cards and Christmas presents that were never acknowledged. After a while, I stopped trying because it was too painful. I met my current girlfriend, Amy, about 3 years ago. She's a widow with no children, and she's been incredibly patient with me as I've worked through my trust issues and trauma. We've built a quiet, stable life together. I'd accepted that my kids might never know the real story, and I'd focused on building a new life rather than dwelling on the past. The truth comes out 2 weeks ago. I got a call that changed everything. It was from Sarah's sister, Lisa, who I'd always gotten along with but who had cut contact with me after the divorce like the rest of the family. Lisa was crying and could barely get the words out. She told me that Mark had been arrested for embezzlement from his real estate company, and during the investigation, they'd found evidence that he'd been running elaborate scams for years. When the police searched his computer, they found software for creating fake text message screenshots, fake documents, and even fake social media profiles. But the bombshell was what they found in his deleted files. Mark had kept detailed records of how he'd framed me for cheating on Sarah. There were drafts of the fake text messages, research into my work travel schedule, receipts for the credit card he'd fraudulently opened in my name, and even communications with a female accomplice who had posed as Monica in photos. Lisa said the police had found evidence that Mark had been having an affair with this same woman for over 4 years, starting about 6 months before he began framing me. Apparently, Jessica had been getting suspicious, and Mark decided the best way to deflect attention from his own cheating was to create a fake scandal involving me. The most sickening part was that Mark had documented his entire plan like he was proud of it. He'd written about how easy it was to manipulate Sarah because she was already insecure about my work travel. He'd bragged about how he'd slowly planted seeds of doubt in her mind over several weeks before presenting the evidence. Lisa told me that when Sarah found out the truth, she'd had a complete breakdown. She'd been hospitalized for 3 days. The kids had been told that there had been a mistake about what happened with their father, but they were confused and didn't understand what was going on. The aftermath, when I finally called Sarah a few days later, she was barely coherent. She kept saying, "I'm sorry," over and over, crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said she knew she could never undo what she'd done to me, but she wanted to tell the kids the truth and try to repair their relationship with me. But here's where I'm struggling. Sarah told me that Emma and Jake were angry and confused. They'd spent 8 years believing their father was a bad man who had abandoned them. Emma is now 12 and has been in therapy for years dealing with abandonment issues that stem from believing her father chose another woman over his family. Jake has been acting out at school and has gotten into several fights when other kids teased him about his deadbeat dad. Sarah wants to slowly reintroduce me into their lives and see if we can rebuild our relationship naturally. The problem is that my kids are essentially strangers to me now. Emma was 4 when this all started, and Jake was 2. They don't remember the father who coached Little League and read bedtime stories. They only know the version of me that Mark and Sarah created. The family wants forgiveness. Robert called me last week, and it was one of the most surreal conversations of my life. This man who had stood in my kitchen 8 years ago calling me a lying cheater was now sobbing on the phone, begging for my forgiveness. He said he and Linda had spent thousands of dollars on private investigators trying to figure out how they could help repair the damage they'd done to my life. He offered to pay for the best family lawyer to help restore my custody rights, to cover any therapy costs for me and the kids, and even to help me relocate back to their area if I wanted to be closer to Emma and Jake. Linda has been sending me long emails detailing how guilty she feels and how she wants to tell everyone in town what really happened to restore my reputation. She's offered to make public statements, to personally apologize to every client I lost, to do whatever it takes to undo the damage. But here's what really bothers me about all of this. Where were these people when I was begging them to believe me 8 years ago? Robert looked me in the eye and called me a liar when I told him I'd never cheated on his daughter. Linda spread rumors about me to everyone in town. They supported Sarah in taking my children away and fought to minimize my role in their lives. They didn't just believe evidence that was presented to them. They actively participated in destroying me. Now they want forgiveness because they found out they were wrong, but I can't forget that they never gave me the benefit of the doubt. Sarah's desperation. Sarah has been calling me daily, sometimes multiple times a day. She sent me hundreds of text messages, long emails, and even had flowers delivered to my apartment. She's desperate to make things right, but I don't know if that's even possible. She's told me that she's been going to therapy specifically to deal with the guilt of what she did to me. She's admitted that she had doubts about the evidence at the time, but Mark was so convincing, and she was already feeling insecure about our marriage. The thing that really gets to me is that she's framing this like she was also a victim of Mark's manipulation. While that's technically true, she was also an active participant in my destruction. She's the one who filed for divorce, got the restraining order, fought for full custody, and told our children that their father was a bad man. She's begging me to move back to town, saying we could start over, maybe even reconcile romantically. She says she never stopped loving me and wants to know if there's any chance we could be a family again. The kids' reaction. Sarah arranged for me to have a video call with them last week, and it was devastating. Emma, who's now 12, was angry and confused. She said she didn't understand why everyone had lied to her, and she didn't know what to believe anymore. She asked me why I never tried to see her if I really loved her, and when I tried to explain about the court restrictions and the distance, she said it sounded like I was making excuses. Jake, who's 10, was quieter but seemed almost afraid of me. He kept looking off camera, presumably at Sarah, as if he needed permission to talk to me. When I asked him about school and his interests, he gave one-word answers. At one point, he asked if I was going to take him away from his mom, and I could hear the fear in his voice. It's clear that these kids have been traumatized by this whole situation, and I don't know if my presence in their lives would help or make things worse. They've spent 8 years believing one story about their father, and now they're being told a completely different version. The ultimatum last week. Sarah gave me what essentially amounts to an ultimatum. She said that she's told Emma and Jake that I'm considering moving back to be closer to them, and they're starting to get excited about the possibility of having a normal relationship with their father. She said that if I don't commit to moving back within the next month, she's going to have to tell the kids that I've chosen my new life over them. She claims she's not trying to manipulate me, but she says the kids need stability and can't be left wondering whether their father is going to be part of their lives or not. The pressure this puts on me is enormous. If I don't go back, I become the father who abandoned his children twice. But if I do go back, I'm essentially rewarding the people who destroyed my life and giving up the stability and peace I've worked so hard to build. My decision after weeks of agonizing over this decision, I've finally made up my mind. I'm not moving back. I've realized that going back would mean accepting that what happened to me wasn't really that bad, that it's something I should just get over and move on from. It would mean rewarding the people who destroyed my life and validating their expectation that I should be grateful for their belated recognition of my innocence. More importantly, I've realized that the children Emma and Jake are now aren't the children I lost 8 years ago. They're strangers who have been raised to see me as either a villain or an absent father. Even if we could build some kind of relationship, it would be starting from scratch with kids who have been traumatized by believing their father abandoned them. I can't get back the years I lost with them. I can't undo the damage that's been done. And I can't pretend that we could just pick up where we left off as if nothing happened. The truth is, I'm not the same person I was 8 years ago either. The man who coached Little League and read bedtime stories was destroyed by what Sarah's family did to him. I've rebuilt myself into someone stronger and more self-protective, but also someone who doesn't automatically trust or forgive. I've spent years learning to value my own well-being and to set boundaries with people who want to use me for their own purposes. Going back would mean abandoning everything I've learned about protecting myself. The consequences. I called Sarah yesterday to tell her my decision. She didn't take it well. She screamed at me, calling me selfish and cruel, saying that I was abandoning my children all over again. She said that Emma and Jake would never forgive me for choosing my girlfriend over them. When I tried to explain that this wasn't about Amy, that it was about my own mental health and the fact that I couldn't trust her family not to hurt me again, she said I was making excuses. She said that if I really loved my children, I would do whatever it took to be part of their lives. Sarah also threatened to tell Emma and Jake that I had chosen not to come back, that I had decided my new life was more important than being their father. I told her that she was free to tell them whatever she wanted, but that I wouldn't be manipulated into making a decision based on threats. The call ended with Sarah hanging up on me, but not before telling me that I was just as bad as Mark, that I was destroying my children's lives just like he had destroyed mine. Moving forward, word of my decision has spread quickly through Sarah's family, and the responses have been predictably negative. Robert called me to say he was disappointed in me. Linda sent me a long email about how I was perpetuating the cycle of abandonment and trauma that Mark had started. But there have also been some unexpected voices of support. Jessica, Mark's ex-wife, called to say she understood my decision and thought I was brave for protecting myself. She said that Mark's family had always been manipulative and controlling. Most importantly, Amy has been incredible. She's told me that she's proud of me for making a decision based on what I need rather than what other people expect from me. I know that my decision means I may never have a meaningful relationship with Emma and Jake. That reality is heartbreaking, and I know I'll carry that grief for the rest of my life. But I've also realized that the alternative might have been even more painful for all of us. I've decided to pursue legal action against Mark, Sarah, and her parents. Not for the money, but because I need some official recognition of the injustice that was done to me. My therapist has been helping me process the grief of losing my children again, but also the relief of not having to constantly defend myself to people who have already shown they can't be trusted. I'm learning to accept that some losses can't be recovered from, and that sometimes the healthiest choice is to let go rather than keep fighting. Final thoughts. So that's my story. I was falsely accused of cheating by my brother-in-law, who was actually the one having an affair. My wife and her family destroyed my life based on fabricated evidence. I lost my children, my business, my reputation, and my community. 8 years later, the truth came out, and they wanted me to come back and pretend nothing had happened. I chose not to go back. I chose to protect the life I've built and the person I've become. I chose to prioritize my own mental health over the expectations of people who had already shown they couldn't be trusted. Some people will say I'm selfish, that I should have put my children's needs first. But I believe that children deserve parents who are healthy and whole, not parents who sacrifice their own well-being out of guilt or obligation. I believe that I can't be a good father to children who see me as a stranger or a villain, especially when their mother and extended family are actively working against any relationship we might build. I also believe that actions have consequences, and that people who destroy others' lives shouldn't be rewarded with forgiveness and reconciliation just because they feel bad about it later. Sarah's family made choices that devastated me and my children. Now they have to live with the consequences of those choices, just like I've had to live with the consequences of their actions. I may never know if I made the right decision. I may regret it for the rest of my life. But I know that I made the decision that felt right for me at the time, based on my own needs and values rather than on the expectations and manipulations of others. And for the first time in 8 years, I'm at peace with my life and my choices. That has to count for something. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button.